Thanks everybody for joining us during your lunch hour. We had Yetunde on stage earlier to talk about delivering the thrill. I think we're going to deliver the thrill with some data today, some stories and insights. It's been probably about 2 years since we last did this together.
It was LA.
Yeah, things have evolved pretty significantly since then. We're going to talk today about the return of sales and loyalty and what's impacting that. Things like inventory, the transition to electrification, let's get into it. So my name is Adam Lobelson. I am the Executive Director for S&P Global Mobility. My team, some of which are over here, are supporting the OEMs and the agencies across the Polk Automotive Solutions product suite. I have my esteemed colleague, Stephanie Brinley, with me as well. Stephanie is a, did I get a woo somewhere? Yeah, woo!
Thank you, Tanya.
Love that. Stephanie's a principal analyst, automotive, and Stephanie's gonna cover product insights, specifically a lot of great content around electrification, where I'm gonna focus more on the recovery side of the house. So, a very familiar sight, I think, for most of us in this room. Unfortunately, over the last few years, a lot of empty lots, right? Or a handful of vehicles on the lot. Just for fun, show of hands, how many people in this room bought or leased a car in the last 2 years? That's
Follow up.
Fair representation.
Good.
There.
That's actually a lot more people raise their hands than I expected, to be honest. Follow up. Did you get the car you really wanted? Or did you get the car that you could find?
Okay. Yeah, interesting. And then for those that did not buy a car in the last 2 years, same question. Was it because you couldn't get the car you wanted or the pricing was off? Like, yes. I got a few yeses. So I think, the story that we're telling here, right? And this is the first time we've done this. I'm glad that we actually got a nice representative example. The story here is that this is not just news that we're reading about, right? This is not just, something that us in the automotive industry are talking about. This is a real impact that we're all going through. How this shakes out when it comes to sales and loyalty over the coming years is we're obviously with S&P, we're attempting to forecast and figure it out, but it's still yet, remains to be seen how this will really play out in real time. There we go. With that in mind, it's not doom and gloom. We are now on the rise again when it comes to vehicle sales. So, the low last year was less than 14 million vehicles sold. Now we're seeing a continuing trend. We're forecasting a trend through 2025 of continuous growth, up about 17%, from the low in 2022. What's interesting here is that even with that continued rise over the next few years, we're not going to eclipse, at least from our forecasting perspective, we're not going to eclipse where we were pre-pandemic. So again, speaks to this was a massive shakeup in the industry. It's going to take time for things to recover. With that in mind, and we're talking about the positive momentum that we're feeling and that we're seeing right now, I think potentially somewhat obvious when you're looking at it, but there's more inventory now on the lots. Days supply is increasing. And what we're seeing now is a tight correlation between the increase in inventory and day supply and brand loyalty. I mean, really simply put, if you're loyal to a brand and if that car, that make or model is available, there's a better chance that you're going to be loyal than if it's not available. I mean, the best ability often is availability, and we're definitely seeing that right now in the automotive space. It's not all, roses and sunshine. There definitely are some headwinds. One of them now is leasing is below 17% from 30% in 2018. Just a quick anecdote to sort of explain what's going on here. I was just visiting my folks down in Florida, sunny Boca Raton, and I was talking to them about this presentation. Mom's a great listener, of course. And she said it's really interesting. For 40 years, we've been leasing, and for the first time in 40 years, we decided to not lease, buy back the lease from the captive finance company, from the bank. And we don't know what we're going to do. We don't know when we're going to return to market. We don't know if we're going to stick with the brand we were loyal to for the previous 20 years, or go with a different make, a different model, maybe even transition to EV. I think that, we did this poll earlier. This shakeup is going to affect everybody, right? It's going to take time to see how everything pans out. Will they return to market? And when they return to market, will the incentives be there for them to lease with the same company again? So, I think what we're trying to get at is we see what's coming to some extent. We have a good feel for it, but there's a lot going on over the last few years that's going to continue to play out over time. And then also, thinking about my folks for another second, maybe they become brand nomads, what we like to refer to as one and done. They might try something new, they might move to another vehicle. What we're seeing now with this nomadic behavior is that 60% of brand nomads are actually moving into a different body style, which I think is really interesting. I think a lot of that also is availability, right? It's got to fit your lifestyle. We talk about this a lot, right? Especially when we talk about EVs. Yeah. If it doesn't fit your lifestyle, it's probably not going to be the right decision for you. So I think that's what we're also seeing is, a bit of this shakeup. People are finding what they need, as opposed to what they potentially want. It's a little different.
And some desires are changing.
Some desires are changing, absolutely. And with that point, I think that's a great transition because when we talk about the change over the last few years and what's been going on, it's really important to think about consumer behavior at large. We're all buying online. Not that we weren't before the pandemic, but that's shifted very drastically. And I think furthermore, our expectations have changed.
I think they have. I mean, we were talking outside earlier today. At the very beginning of COVID and the first few months after that, maybe the first 6 months, the conversations, we're going to need a bazillion more electric delivery cargo vans because everybody's going to order line and they're going to want it in 12 hours. I don't know. I was shopping for a dress the other day. I was ordering it online. It was going to come in 6 or 7 days. And I was like, well, going to have to work with that. Cars now, you're ordering them. They're going to take a little bit longer. So we are seeing certainly that assumption that this is how it's going to change and that steady state in maybe June of 2020 is how the world's going to be forever isn't true. And now we do see consumers changing and we do see personalization is certainly part of that. And
yeah, and I think we saw personalization coming, but this was a catalyst to personalization, right? This changing expectations. So, now, part of the messaging like you're seeing here, right, which is configure the Kia that's right for you. We're going to see more of that, and we should see more of that, as these trends continue to evolve. And expectations are less give me now. It's, what? This has been an issue for a while. I know I'm going to have to wait, so I might as well get exactly what I'm looking for. So some of the statistics around that, 56% of consumers are willing to wait 1 month to get the vehicle that they want. Furthermore, 60% expect that purchase to be completed online. And even more so, 70% would select a dealership that's outside of their comfort zone to get the right pricing, the right model, et cetera. So I think we're all sort of evolving sort of together, not just us in the auto industry, but my mom and dad.
Yep.
So, yeah. And, obviously electrification is a massive piece of this as well. What we see right now is that 1 in 7 registrations are either EV or hybrid, right? And so in terms of that transition, what we're seeing is by the end of the decade about 50% of vehicles, new registrations are going to be, what do you say?
2030, about 43%.
It's it's lower? Or?
About 43% pure electric, but probably
with hybrid.
With hybrid, you've got your 50%.
What's the 50? Okay. So with hybrid and electric, it'll be about 50% that are 50% share of the vehicles in operation on the road, which is pretty amazing. I mean, we were just talking about it. Like, I made the comment, what would that look like? And you said, probably what it looks like today. I think we're, the EVs are becoming sort of the mainstream, which is really interesting. And with that in mind, I will kick it.
I'm going to ask you to click for me if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
Because I have numbers that are not 100% my head. So.
Anything you want.
We will move on to the next slide. And as we talk about EVs I keep hearing this, EVs are becoming mainstream. 7% of the market of share in January 2023 versus 4% in January 2022 of pure EVs is a big jump. It is getting there. We're seeing segments fill out. We're seeing all that. But we're not quite at a mainstream level yet at 6%. But we're getting there. One of the things that we need is charging infrastructure. The number of chargers grew more in 2022 than they did in the 3 or 4 years combined. Part of that probably was COVID. But we still need more. And this is an industry issue in general. There's no one solution to it. One of the things that the Inflation Reduction Act, of course, broke out a lot of money, and the Build Back Better, lose track of all these names, right? But the other one, the $7.5 billion in charging networks from the government, what that can do is kind of free up some capital. So you can get a company able to build a charging infrastructure maybe a few years before they might have had the money to do it. So that's how that sort of jump starts this infrastructure. But it's still a significant problem. Today, if you don't have an EV charger at home or at your work that you can consistently rely on, and you can do that, it's really hard to own an EV in most markets. There's a handful of cities where they can make it work, but mostly it's very, very difficult if you don't have home charging.
I think that goes back to also like the lifestyle piece, right? It's like if it doesn't fit your lifestyle, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
You're going to wait.
Absolutely. That's always been first and foremost. We've talked about EVs, we've talked about fuel economy, we've talked about everything else, but really, if the vehicle doesn't fit in your driveway, if you can't put your dogs in it, if you can't put your kids in it, whatever it is you want, if you're single and you just want the roof down all the time, whatever that is that you want, if it doesn't fit, you're not going to buy it. We do have more EVs coming. This is driven by a million different reasons, but in 2020 we had 24. In 2026 we've got about 23, and in 2030 we're seeing about 315 models in our forecast. Interesting, 2025 we're looking at about 18% market share for BEVs, and 2030, I promised I had numbers. 2030 we're looking at for that 43% number. So we're going to see then, though, what happens is that BEV powertrains surpass gas, certainly by the end of the decade, and that is going to make things super complicated in terms of share because of the number of models that we have that are going to be available. Whoops.
Did I go too?
Yeah.
Is there a back button?
There we go.
Yes. No.
That's all right.
Maybe somebody up there can. Okay. Nope, we're jumping forward. Thank you.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay. So in 2026, I did this count using our data, and I counted the number of vehicles that have the propulsion system. So, for example, in this, and this is really, there are some general counts in here, and we should look at this as an estimate rather than a hard number. But if you've got, for example, Hyundai Kona, which was just revealed to the U.S. market a little bit ago, it has a gas version, it has an electric version. That's two models in this count. So it's important to keep that in mind, too, as we look at that. But we'll have more EV than ICE models in 2026, but I also said in 2025 we're only 18% market share. So it goes up in 26 from there, but it's not 30%, it's not 40%, it's not 50%, but there's more models available, which as marketing means you've got to figure out how to sell again, more with less, right? You've got a lot of competition. I was just speaking with the head of RAM after the REV reveal a few minutes ago, and one of my questions, which he said he's kind of working through, is what do you do? How do you market these vehicles as they come out? Do you then, as a RAM that has an ICE and a BEV, and will have an extended range thing, and then you've got Kona, and that has ICE and a BEV, versus something that's just electric, who are you talking to? If you've got that RAM, if you've got that Kona, are you looking for somebody who's a subcompact CUV buyer and then filtering down to what their powertrain interest is? Or are you looking for an EV buyer and trying to make sure that they know that you have a Kona EV? That's one of the challenges that's going to happen when you have a situation where you've got more EVs than ICE and still more volume out of ICE than EV. And it gets really complicated. 2027, 643 models by propulsion system design. I don't know, if you're a consumer, that's a lot of choice to work through.
A little too much choice.
A little too much choice, but it's where we're at. And from a marketing perspective, that's a lot of clutter to get through. And how do you find and talk to the person who you know wants that vehicle? Because you know they're out there. So sales per nameplate then is a number that I've talked about several times. I kind of like it. Go back to what you know, right? But it's interesting. We will see the sales per nameplate overall market fall and then come back again. But one of the things that I see in here is that the EV sales per nameplate doesn't get as high as the ICE sales per nameplate, which creates a bit of a profitability question. How are you going to get your profitability and your scale up when your your sales per nameplate drops? And one of the things I didn't necessarily do with this is to keep in mind those numbers. If you pull out the top 10 or 15 models, you pull out 25% of the market. So anybody who's not in that top 15 from a model level, they're getting half of that. So it's a very difficult scenario to work through in terms of finding consumers is where your problem comes into that. So CUV migration continues. One of the things that we've seen is automakers are looking to introduce EVs in the most popular segments. And where people live the most, well, that's compact CUVs and mid-size CUVs. Those are the two dominants. So that's where they're at. So you can have whatever you want in 2030 as long as it's a utility vehicle. Maybe a couple of pickup trucks. Sports cars fall off the cliff, unfortunately. But when we look at this too, in 2022, pickup share was about 19% and car share was 19%. In 2025, EV pickup share will be 20% and cars falls to 14.78, give or take. So our cars fall down quite a bit too. And I think there's two reasons for that. One of it is, of course, people are buying fewer cars. But I think we're going to come to a point where if you look at the behavior that we've been talking about since 2020 and buying what you can find and buying what's being built, you don't have a choice. There's a number of sedans that are gone and not coming back. So automakers are investing less in sedans. To a degree, it's what consumers want, but I think there's some space for pushback there in 2030. So when we look at this, and we look at this huge number of utility vehicles and not very many cars, not very many sports cars, what does this industry do? It looks for white space, because consumers will eventually kind of do that. I don't know what that white space answer is going to be, but we're going to have that interesting thing happen going forward. Propulsion by design. So when we look at those CUVs that I was talking about too, in 2018, 98% of CUV sales were internal combustion engines. By 2030, it's 22%. So most of them are going electric. In 2035, our forecast is for 7.7% of CUVs to be internal combustion engine vehicles, because they're not quite going away 100%, which is not fair. From 2022, EV share of CUVs was 6.8. So you see an inverse. You see those flip. Utilities will remain profitable, the profitability encourages that segment. That continues to grow. Pickup ICE declines slower. The share and the conversion for pickup truck, EV, and ICE is more into the next decade, because obviously pickup trucks have some use cases that ICE isn't quite ready to handle. Even though we're going to have, I think, 10 pickup models in the next 2 years that are EV, they're not ready yet to take on everything that people need. And some of those models are new entrants. It's going to be really interesting to see those come in and try, and you're looking at Kia's looking at an EV pickup truck, small EV. We've got, of course, the VW Scout brand. We've got Hyundai looking at that. We've got VW looking at their own as well. Because they're like, wait a second, we can jump in on this pickup truck thing because it's easier to do off of a BEV platform. We'll see where consumers follow, if they do or they don't. Cars, again, increasing share of EV, but overall volume falls below 15% by 2030. Sports cars. Come on, somebody, build me a sports car. More than one. Sports car share has been falling for years, but last year it was about 2.4%. When we look out, we're looking at about 1.5%. So if you look at the share of EVs within sports cars, it comes up, but that volume has fallen. So we'll see a scenario where there's more EV cars, there's more EV sports cars, there's more EV pickups, there's more EV utilities, but these other segments in volume fall. So there's still fewer of them. Oops, sorry. Hit the wrong thing. So with that, as we talk about segments, let's talk about the show for a second. You know, I've been doing auto show tours for a long time. And this year, we were looking at the show floor, and I'm designing our tour, and I've only got 7 stops. Last year, I had 12. In 2019 at the show, last year I had 10. In 2019, I had 12. We don't have as many products coming out right now, which, as we look at shows like this, one of the interesting things to me is we can't then say, seeing the 7 cars that are being introduced here tells us the direction of the market. There's a small clue because there's so much electrification, but that's happening regardless. I mean, it's not really telling us what people want. It's just what we're having at this particular moment. I don't know what's going to happen to auto shows, which kills me. Grew up on auto shows. It makes me very sad. But we do still have them for now. Let's keep it going. Let's make these come back again. The most important introduction this year, 2 of them, I guess. You look at the Ram EV pickup truck, and you look at the Kia EV9. Those are the 2 most important. I'm not sure I'm going to say which one is. For the brands, of course, they're both huge. The Ram pickup truck, they decided to take their time a little bit coming back, but they've just announced 500 miles range for their larger battery pack, 350 for the smaller battery pack. They're making sure that the truck can do what truck stuff does, 14,000 pounds towing capacity. How long it can charge tow 14,000 pounds is still up for debate, I think. They haven't talked about that number yet, I should say. And there's still more news to come. Like other pickup trucks and utility vehicles, when we launch these electric vehicles, we're putting on a reservation system, and the reservations are all gone. So I'm like, so how many is that? You sold out in 72 hours, but were you selling 10? They weren't selling 10. But they don't want to share that number just yet. We're not getting that. But, to Ram's point, they did open that up. Their first edition vehicles, they ran out, and so they went ahead and got some more allocation. Told me today, effectively, the first year is sold out, which is the same story that we've heard from Ford, the same story that we've heard from General Motors and their pickup trucks. Part of that's volume, and it'll come back up. And Kia's EV9, it looks like a beautiful evolution of Telluride in a lot of ways. And I think Kia's going to be really strong. The pricing is going to come on really strong. The accessibility for families that need the 3-row is coming on really strong. One of the disappointing things, if their international version, they talked about these swivel seats and you could turn things around. Yeah, we're just going to have 3 regular rows. They couldn't quite figure out how to adjust crash. What happens if you're facing the wrong way? So that's one of the things going on with that. So we've got Hyundai Kona, which I also mentioned as well. So it's 2 of the 3 products are EVs. Genesis is talking about an extension to the GV80 SUV lineup with a coupe version that'll come a little bit, and Jeep has a Wrangler. And VW and Subaru have special editions of the VW Atlas called Atlas Peak and Subaru Crosstrek Wilderness. So we're talking about 3 major products and a couple of facelifts. So still, go see what's out there, and let's bring this stuff back.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for spending time with us.
Thank you so much. That was so good, so informative. Give it up for these guys.